Welcome to this episode of Unstoppable Journeys. My name is Ryan Gubick, founder and personal CFO of MRG Wealth, and I'd like to introduce you to a special guest we have today, Tyler Nicholetts, owner of Nicholetts Coaching. Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Ryan.
Oh, thanks for coming today.
Great studio.
You like it?
Yeah.
You like the mountain?
I do. Very fitting.
So, Tyler, we were talking about a big problem that you love helping solve around that personal growth mindset for people. Can you share a bit more about, what that problem is that you're so passionate about solving?
Thank you. Yes. When you do the self-work, you do the deep work with yourself, you realize a lot of people have the same things going on. So when I started doing some of my work, I'm going to say just even some therapeutic work back when I was about 19 years old, my parents were going through a divorce. I started to really do some self-reflection, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And then as time progressed, that type of work and the deep work and what that means to me, it really set me on a path of trying to figure out what was running me, like air to a bird and water to a fish. You don't know what's happening. It's just right there, and something's running the show. So you show up and you deal with things, or you think you're dealing with things, whether it's your physical body, your mind, your soul, your subconscious. You really don't know. So I got super curious. So for me, personal growth has been and will be a lifelong commitment. And so my avatar, who I serve, is my former self. Besides being a CEO of a company or a retiree, which are two broad spectrums, being an entrepreneur, being a business professional, being a divorcee, working through athletics and team sports and coaching. A lot of the people that I've met and I like to help have gone through the same sort of process. And if you have a growth mindset and if you're a top performer, I really feel like you're more available to the type of work and you're more curious to figure some of this stuff out. So for me, because I live in that world of curiosity, I'm never settled. I'm a hyperachiever, which is a saboteur of mine, for sure. And I'm a stickler and all these things that come up. But there's just so much work that I've done that exposes the deep confronting work that until you do that, you really don't know what's going on. And I just love where I'm at, and I love serving.
Oh, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And what are some of
answered your question?
Maybe we can dive a little bit more deeper into that. Like, what are some of the big common problems that you find a lot of your clients have with that growth mindset? What are they looking for help with, and what's kind of preventing them to move to that next plateau or that next step?
Two things on that, and one would be a lot of the bullshit stories that run us. I'm assuming it's okay to swear.
Oh, of course.
Okay.
It's a genuine show.
Yeah.
Be honest, authentic.
I love it. The bullshit stories that seem to run our thinking, like there's so much of that. To get that out of the way, and I just mentioned saboteurs, that's new work that I'm doing. Shiraz Sharman, he created positive intelligence, so instead of EQ, IQ, he's PQ, positive intelligence quotient, and really digging into a lot of those, the judge in us and all of that stuff that, whether we're sitting here in front of somebody and we're truly listening to their words, or we're listening from a place of cognitive dissonance. Do I like them? I don't like them. Do I believe what they're saying? And all this stuff that comes up, and or some past life experience that you've had that comes into your thinking, and you really sometimes don't hear what's happening. You really don't hear somebody. You don't allow them to be heard because there's so much other shit running the show that you haven't grappled with and distinguished. That kind of stuff, like disrupting that early on, is super important.
Sounds like there's so much unintentional roadblocks that we put in our own mind or body that sometimes we don't realize they're even there.
Yeah.
Until they're called out and identified. And then once you call them out and identify, then you can fix them.
Yeah.
Is that kind of a fair summary?
100%. And I'm not a talk therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I love those people. I've worked with them. But with respect to getting some of this out of their thinking to focus on the current and the future, which is what I focus on. Sorry, I did that.
You're good.
That's super important to get out of their thinking and just to expose it. and the judge that we have in us that is always showing up. Like for me, I know there's certain things. Think back to when I was 10 years old, running the first base in baseball. I'm slow. Got baked in my head. I was really good at hitting the ball over the fence and things, and I was an athlete, and I think I had some pretty decent baseball skill, but I was pretty slow from a running perspective. That went into my subconscious. So I became a slow thinker, became not smart enough. I became thinking about I'm stupid. That kind of stuff shows up and it starts percolating. You don't realize how much of that just gets baked in. And
all that damaging thinking in your own head.
And it shows up. And so to spend time on that is super important. We're not talking about that for years. It's, it is what it is to get to recognize that and expose it. But with respect to how deep you can go, with some of that work, it's scary. And then you realize it when you've exposed some of those things. Keep saying exposed because that's the best way it lands with me. How much that hijacks your thinking. Whether you're in a boardroom, whether you're, with your family, your friends, whatever it may be. Like just recognizing some of that thought process and those thought patterns. To me, the best way to, deepest and most important part to start.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And for those that are listening, take a time to reflect and think about what kind of negative thoughts do you have in your head? Because I know, I have 2 young daughters and we spend a lot on positive thinking and I can mentality and all of that. But I think sometimes as adults, we forget to look in our own mirror and reflect and be like, okay, am I can do attitude all day? Or do I put the I can't and some negative thinking in my own head? Whether it be like, oh, I can't, achieve the financial success I want in life, or I can't get that promotion, or I can't be fast enough to run the next base, or I can't look a certain way, right? Like, I think many of us are probably guilty at doing, being our own worst critics.
100%.
And we could already be amazing at running a base, or the second or third best on the team, but if we think no, we're slow, or we can't, it manifests itself and makes it all slower.
Yeah, and we're not, and then that just gets baked in, right? And it's pretty scary stuff. And to go through the process, God, it's just, I think it's if you're available, if you're open to that, if you're curious enough, and you're vulnerable and ready to be get your humility out of the way and just really show up, for yourself and figure out what's going on. That's a beautiful place to be.
That's another good point about being vulnerable and talking about humility and kind of putting that in a box and moving to the side. Because quite often, especially in the personal finances space, when we're initially working with someone, people are nervous or sometimes shy to ask questions and trying to rip that Band-Aid off early on and be like, ask a ton of questions because that's how you learn.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no age where you should know something or you shouldn't. I work with senior executives that are still asking what they consider basic financial questions, right? But if they don't know, it's going to hinder their financial future. Let's talk about it. And the moment it's like a weight lifted off your shoulders. Yeah. Right? There's so many things. So that vulnerability and humility, I think, is another really good point. We should all embrace it. And if we have questions or we're curious or going back to that like child mentality, ask why and ask how and get the answers.
We forget that stuff. We forget to be curious. We forget to play and and let our mind run. And your type of work, you just make me think about the first thing that shows up for me when you say that is I'd be scared to show you my books.
That's another thing about vulnerability, right?
I would do it, but that's first thing that shows up because I've had money block issues from my first business and lost a lot of money and all that stuff. Like the relationship with money got pretty strained and I've worked through it, but still that's the first thing that shows up when you say stuff like that. Even if I had $1 million sitting there and all the things, I'd be like, I don't know if I want to show them that. I'm embarrassed or something like that.
And I think that's a very common feeling. And, for everyone to know that if they're feeling that, they're not the only ones. Like many people are feeling that, whether someone's starting their career and feeling they, are not making enough or haven't saved enough, or I've talked to, individuals making 7 figures and having 7-figure accounts, and they still feel that way. Right. So it's that ingrained, I don't know where in society we started to develop that phobia around money, but the talking about money, the relationships around money quite often is a combination of nature and nurture. Like, what is our past experiences with family and anything else that happened in our life that shaped how we view and feel it. But again, the moment you start talking about it with someone that you can truly trust and raise some of those concerns, and maybe it is embarrassment or something else, talk about like the why and put a plan together, all that just gets lifted.
Yeah.
And it becomes enjoyable and fun, and there's like progression. And similar to what you're talking about earlier about growth mindset, it changes from kind of a negative thought process to a positive thought process.
Yes. Yeah. But it's okay to go down that negative path, to just, I hate the word negative, but because you went there, like it's a lot of negative thought patterns. It is what it is. Just call them out for what they are. And that's that. It's not a bad thing. We all have them.
Yep.
There's not one person listening here that doesn't have a voice in their head running the show.
Exactly.
You just got to expose it, recognize it, find a way to deal with it, cope with it, and get it out of your future thinking as much as you can. But I don't care who you are on this planet. Like, we all got some things up there that we try to mute them, we try to listen to them, we try to suppress them. Some of the good, bad, ugly, whatever it is, right?
You got to embrace them.
Yeah.
You got to label them, call them, and we have good days and bad days.
Yeah.
Some days we're more on top of the game than others, and that's okay as well.
Yeah.
So what made you...
Good.
Sorry, go for it.
I was going to say, that's a good point. I was talking about this with an awesome friend of mine about flow states. And I'm sure you've been in a flow state.
Let's talk about what is a flow state.
For me, I can tell since you started this in December, like, you're just vibing. You're at a high vibe. You're flowing. You're not in a, Dr. Hawkins' book, Power versus Force. You're not in a forceful position. You're in a power position, meaning you're just flowing. You are who you are. You've set an intention. You're following through with that. Things are happening for you because you're just in a very solid mindset. But those flow states, like when you're up there and you're just on autopilot, like it is addictive. We all can't stay there, because if we did, then we wouldn't know what it feels like to be in that state. And I know I've been pissed off sometimes, like, oh God, why I was up here, what's happening? Whether it's a day or a week, I'm like, what the hell, And it's I think a little bit unsustainable for us to always constantly be at peak performance or peak flow state. But to recognize when you're in and out of it, I think that's where the magic is. So I sense just the way you speak, the way you present yourself, you're vibing high.
Oh, thank you. I love what I do, love helping people, and love honoring individuals like yourself that are helping, individuals have an unstoppable journey. And that's what this show is all about. Is just sharing that knowledge with others.
I love it. There you go. Sorry, I don't know if that answered your question, but what's your perspective on flow state? Or what I said, did that resonate? Or?
Yeah, I think I had a mentor a number of years ago, talk about, life's a marathon, right? Has anyone heard that? Like, life's a marathon, keep a steady pace, and you'll succeed. And he was like, no. That's garbage. I'm like, oh, tell me more. He's like, life's not a marathon. It's a series of sprints, right? And you can't burn yourself out. So and maybe that kind of interjects with what you're talking about with flow states. I think it has a lot of similarities. You have periods and days and weeks or months where you're pushing and you're running high, and maybe you're spending more time and energy, and it's a sprint up, and then you need to catch your breath and calm down, relax, and then you go in another sprint rather than like this constant state marathon. Because when we think about our daily lives, some days I got more meetings and more children's activities, and it just feels like a blink from 6 a.m. to 10 o'clock at night. And then other days, there's more space in there, right? It's time to catch your breath or take a day off for the weekend. So kind of your flow state analogy always reminds me of, one of my prior mentors that talked about life's a series of sprints. And make sure you give it your all when you're in the sprint and you need to, but also take some time off and breathe and enjoy life and catch your breath, because the next sprint's about to start.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That reminds me of it's in my language, it's on my website, and some of the things I do, and it comes from my hockey background, is create time and space. Whether you have the puck on the ice, create time and space for you to make decisions, think a little bit. Same thing in life, whether that's 2 minutes during the day, 10 seconds, a 15-minute meditation, just sit with yourself, sit with your thoughts, whatever it is, just create some time and space. Otherwise, yeah, it's a blink. The day's done. Say, holy shit, what happened? Go to bed, do it over again.
Yeah.
And you're just running.
And was I intentional with today's time? Or
Yeah.
was I unintentional, like you talked about earlier?
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, exactly.
So what made you want to get into, coaching? And, it sounds like you have two different avenues of coaching. I believe you mentioned you had personal growth coaching and you also have kind of business owner coaching. What made you want to go down that path and help people solve this problem?
I think I finally listened to the final tap on my shoulder. I don't know how to summarize this a bit, but I started coaching sport and helping my dad at 17, and just really started observing what he did. And he was a business owner operator, so he's constantly coaching people in business, and I didn't see that every often, but with respect to just coaching in sports and then evolving in my business setting, like I've been coaching in business and sport for over 20 years. I'm very comfortable in that. But this whole personal growth thing, it's not a COVID-inspired thing for me. It's years and years of feeling comfortable serving people as much as I've tried to serve myself, and realizing that I have so much to give, and I can really become an empty container for people, which is a slippery slope because I'm an empath. So I get the heart on the sleeve, so I can really, really go deep. And serve people in a way it's really exhausting for me, because I give a shit so much when I want to help somebody and they've demonstrated the same commitment. That's one thing I was worried about getting into this, but being drawn to it 8 years ago when I started going through a divorce and really starting to do more deep work at that time, and then just observing people and how they're helping me. And it's not, shelf help. Like, God, the amount of books and stuff, we love, I'm assuming you do. I love reading. Just can't get enough. My book lists are endless.
There's so much to learn out there.
Get through it, right? Yeah. And weekend warrior stuff, but the coaching thing just drew me in. And in 2019, I had a friend that gave me a book, and it really started to crack me open, called Failing Forward, and it really helped me acknowledge, all of the things that happened and for the reason they did, and for me to acknowledge some of that. And then I just got curious, and I got a friend of mine I almost went in business with. He started helping me, really started to work on my purpose and my why, my core values, and, saying no to opportunities with jobs rather than just chase a job, chase a title, chase some sort of happiness, just trying to look inward. And then I just got addicted to it. And more and more and more. And then I did something that really was scary with another program that was very transformative with me. And anyone around and close to me saw that shift. And so I was like, holy shit, I can't believe after all these years, like all of this stuff, it's there. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, man, I'm loving this. I'm loving it. Like, it's not exhausting to me. I get energy from it. And it's fascinating. And so I had registered a multi-sport youth sport association, which kept coming up as an idea with my background in sport, of some things that were not being solved with the typical singular sport associations, and trying to have a human development through the modality of a team sport. And all these things started to feed into my thoughts. I'm like, okay, I need to coach the youth, volunteers, coaches, referees, parents, integrate, do things a little different. I kept adding to the toolbox. And then I was like, dude, pay attention, do that. This is a great passion project. Don't stop, follow through. But the coaching aspect was just so prominent. And then I got a certification just because I felt like an imposter if I didn't have something, which is great because it's set me on another great path, and it's opened up so many other doors.
And what's the certification?
I'm a big member with Mind Valley. Vishen Lakhiani, he wrote the Buddha and the Badass and the Code of the Extraordinary Mind. He's just got an amazing platform, and so they developed lots of different coaching certifications through this group, and just incredible. I can't even summarize the amount of thought leaders, and there's tons of science and neuroscience and real life examples and all these things that get baked into their programs. So I was all in with that, and that's what I took. And I'm still in more programs today. Coaches need to coach, right? So I have another program. I got 4 or 5 coaches I work with in group sessions. I'll never stop that now because I'm addicted to it. So I'm now in another group coaching a program with 5 other coaches in North America. Accountability group, like working with people and just adding to our toolbox.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And learning, I feel
that was a long answer, but
oh, that was great.
Maybe you can edit some of that out.
That was perfect. I appreciate you sharing all that.
Yeah.
And I think learning is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think sometimes, learning is talked about, you get one designation or one, certificate, and then you're like, okay, I'm done. But I like how you talked about, like, you're in the next one, and coaches need to teach the coaches.
Yeah.
I same belief, like, I'll be learning until I die. And there's always something new to learn. And as you kind of pull on the string, you're like, oh, you don't know what you don't know. And then it opens this whole other world up of learning.
Yeah, I fucking love that. Growth mindset. That's it.
Absolutely.
Right there. That's so good. And that's just a little bit more on that. I realized from a lot of the other coaches I've been being mentored by or learning from, they are so, I see they're so right on when you start to consider doing this type of work is to acknowledge all of your experience. If you have it like I do, like I'm coming on 49 years old here. Maybe it'll be 49 by the time this airs. I don't know.
Happy early birthday.
Yeah, thank you. But like to just acknowledge, it's like going to a mechanic shop, right? Like you go to it's expensive to be cheap. Somebody's just starting out, they don't have the experience, or you go to somebody that's got a higher rate and you're going to get better quality work. And there's a price for that. And I know I pay for a value. I'm not chasing, the cheapest product or service out there. And so for me, it really, it was good advice because you have to acknowledge what you come with if you have a lot of experience to offer. And, your avatar is not something you made up because you want to do that. You want to serve that. I am that. So for me, it's very easy to just honor that history.
Yeah, and respect the experiences and everything you learned along the way.
And then just, use that as the leverage, not just a 5-month certification.
Well said.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a bit about the solution that you developed? So when you have clients that come to you with these problems and challenges and they're looking for, help with their growth mindset, what is, a potential solution or path forward look like?
Every situation's different. So the big thing I learned, it's not about me, it's about them. So the agenda is usually their agenda. They don't know what they don't know until you start asking the questions. So for me, it starts with a disruptor session to really get some of these fears and some of this thinking exposed and ask some pretty deep questions to get, the powers in the pause, right? Ask a deep question. You let that resonate. I know that's the way I am. It's like,
Let it
it marinates, and then 30 seconds later, it's like, okay, the truth's coming out, right? And so starting there, and only because it's worked on me, and I'm not for everyone. That's why there's a million coaches and consultants around this world and growing like mad because I think a lot of people are looking and seeking some of this support and this help. You gotta give them space to really start to open up. And for me, it's it's old school relationship building. I'm not a friend. That's going back to the empath thing. That's really one of it's not a blind spot, but it's very hard for me when I see somebody wanting to go all in. But I really need them to open up and trust a safe container that I create for them. And then we can start to get on the future. But the first, like the lowest, it's 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year. It's not a one-night stand, right? So like there's so much that has to be revealed in the first month, call it, whether it's one, depends on the person, weekly, bi-weekly, there's lots of different options to go about it, but that is the foundation. If we can't get some of that, the past, derive future out of the way, then there's no point we can create anything different and create a future to live into.
I think that's a good point too. A lot of this, like you mentioned, it's not a one-night stand, or things don't just happen overnight. It takes a while to be able to even answer the questions. I think sometimes when you're asked a question, like you mentioned, it needs to percolate and think about it.
Yeah.
And that can take a couple different meetings and ask questions a different way to even just pull out what's inside of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just the week later, as simple as, what 3 things worked for you over this past week that we discussed? And then it's a whole other rabbit hole. Just very, very simple. Here's the question, you run with it, and then away we go. So I don't, and again, it's because what's worked with me. There's definitely a process, and there's group coaching. So group coaching that I do is very specific on having some sort of methodology and structure to work around, and that's how I did my certification, which really resonated with me. So you're not all over the place, because you have multiple people. You have to have some sort of format to follow, and everybody knows that up front. It's disclosed. This is the way it is. This is what we're going to cover. Presence and connectedness and all this sort of stuff. But the one-on-one is a different process because it's a deeper relationship. It's not the 10-minute spotlight coaching in a group call where you get some one-on-one stuff, but the rest of it's sharing in your safe home team, if you will, to collaborate with.
And trust, you mentioned safety, and trust and safety kind of go hand in hand. Those are so important. Even when we work with our clients, one of the most powerful question, and what sounds like a simple question, but can take sometimes weeks or months to answer, is what is your vision for the life you want to live?
Yeah. Many don't know.
No. I've done numerous kind of speaking engagements across Canada and different levels of professions and leadership. I've yet to come across to a person that has a personal vision statement written down.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? We do it in business all the time. Yeah. And I didn't have one until, like I was saying, in 2019. I was like, really? Wow. I missed the boat on this. I cannot believe I didn't start there.
It is, and that's the thing. It's a starting point.
Yeah.
Because all your other decisions, like you're talking about earlier about being unintentional, quite often that happens because we don't know what is our vision. Where are we actually going?
Yeah.
So everything in between is kind of guess and check, and not having a roadmap to figure out, okay, am I on track or off track? Well, if we don't know where we're actually headed, we don't know if we're on track or off track.
Yeah. And just through this conversation, you make me think of, he doesn't know it, but one of my mentors is Rich Litvin. I've been following ever since I really got deep into this work, but he coaches through insights. And so sometimes it's a 15-minute conversation. And there's just one insight that comes out of these questions in this moment. And it's not 2 hours, it's not a 17-step program and all the things. It's just some sort of insight and breakthrough and aha that cracks it open. And then all of the future, the past gets out of the way, the future stuff is addictive. It's like, oh shit, yeah, I want to do this, I want to do that. If money was an issue, what would you do? And just people get fired up. Growth mindset, high performers do for sure. And then they don't need accountability. Believe it or not. And I know I'm this way, is once I'm like a dog on the bone. Once I know where I'm going, what I want, I don't need somebody to hound me. A lot of people need accountability coaching, which is fine. But when that breakthrough is so powerful and that mission is so strong, you just need a thinking partner. You don't need a coach. You don't need an accountability coach to help you, and then you're off on your way. Whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, maybe keep wanting to do it, but again, it's not talk therapy. You don't have to talk to me for 12 years. I'm not doing my job. If that's the case, it should be, pretty short sprints. Going back to your point, right?
Very cool.
Yeah.
Can you share with us an example of a success story where you've worked with, an individual or a business in the past that had some of these problems, implemented your solution, and kind of what that looked like?
Good question. I'll go back to when I wasn't charging anything, just working pro bono, side of the desk stuff, because you don't feel like you should charge anything for what you're doing at that time. Imposter syndrome, all that stuff comes up, right? And just helping I'll go to the personal side, not business. Yeah, a gentleman that was going through a career transition. Very, like, 20 years in his career and very successful, but wanted to make a transition. Didn't know what that was going to look like, but knew that that life served, but it no longer served him, and he needed to just honor it, but step into whatever he was creating for himself, and to just distinguish some of that and not cloud it, but honor it, and then move forward, and then get out of that negative sort of mindset. And that's the fear of what that looks like when somebody's already created a successful business for 20-ish years. And then it's like going back to your first startup. You're super scared to start something new. It's fascinating to me that somebody would go through that type of stage and not have the confidence at that point still in themselves.
Change is tough,
right?
For everybody, right?
Like, money wasn't an issue. None of that's an issue. But yeah, it's pretty significant change.
And then, so what was the outcome after all that?
Oh, he's good. Off to the races. Yeah. Don't know how well he's doing right now. Like, we don't have intimate conversations, but messaging, like, I see his stuff. He's out there and loving it. And I think he found a way to honor the past and bring that into the future, and not dwell on some of the things he was scared about and fearful about, and taking another chance on himself. It's super cool to see.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You got to respect confidentiality, of course.
Oh, of course. Yeah. We can just make up the guy's name.
Yeah.
His first and last name on YouTube here.
And then the business stuff, I was going to say earlier, like, that's definitely former self. Like, God, I'm a perfect textbook example of who I want to help on that side too. Just, I'm a free bird now, free to be, free to act in any all situations, but the amount of stress and shit that was running the show for a long time. Hyperachiever, stickler, pleaser, all the things, right? Yeah.
Well, and having the experience that yourself, does that help you become a better coach? That you've kind of been 100%. Through the ups and downs and have the real life experience behind you?
Yep. I don't think I'd do this without that. Then I'd definitely feel like an imposter if I didn't, walk the talk of what I'm trying to do to serve. So, and that's just the way I am. People get into this and they don't have, their early 20s, and they're incredible at what they do. For me, I would talk about fear. I'd be scared shitless to do something like that without any sort of background. So I 100% leverage. It's not there to, anything I'm developing or anything I've been through I'm better than people or I know more. It's not about knowledge. None of that is, right? One of the coaches said, coaches are about 30 seconds ahead of their clients. Like, we're not that far ahead, right? But if you've walked the talk and you've done some things, it's so helpful to be relatable. Again, going back to the avatar, serving people that you were. Yeah, former self stuff. So
thanks for sharing that.
Doesn't get the logical thinking mind out of it. It's much easier.
I think that's a good point too. It's kind of separating the different components of our brains and how we think and how we interpret things. Yeah. So, and speaking of that, so for people watching this that resonate with, these type of challenges and have a growth mindset and want to take the next step in their life, what are some of the things that they should be thinking right now, or maybe some things that they should be doing to help them on their journey?
Well, going back to the earlier question you had asked, I think we all learn so different. We all go through our own processes so differently. I know I did a lot of self-work without help, and with help I've done both, and then I just felt both one-on-one and coaching, group coaching, served me in different ways. But if you're not sure, like, there's so many options out there. And if you want to see and observe others and all of the things that, if they're vulnerable to share, a group setting is incredible. I feel, because it sparks, oh, I'm not the only one with that issue. Oh shit. I didn't know that. That was an incredible share. And then you get encouraged to share, and then it just builds from there. So a group session could be great for people that are on the fence and or not sure and or think their problems are very unique. Quite often we all have the same things going on behind the scenes, right? And so I think those group sessions are great. The self-help all the books out there are incredible. Lots of different things people can go at it, but again, each to their own. For me, my process is a right fit call, because if it's not right for us, we're not vibing, or you're not in that growth mindset stage. Excuse me. There's lots of other people I can refer you to. Like, that's why there's so many other options out there, and counselors and people I've worked with. Sometimes there's deep-rooted things that they need to really grapple with from a traumatic perspective, right? So, yeah.
Thank you so much for
that
sharing
answers,
that.
but there's so many different ways to go. Yeah.
Well, it gives people things to think about and avenues on which path they can go. And I like how you said, finding a fit. I think that's important for so many trusted professionals in life, right? Like, it's finding a right fit for a coach, finding a right fit for, a personal CFO, finding a right fit for your dentist, your accountant, all those things, right? There's many professionals out in the world, but everyone is unique, has different challenges, have different personalities, and finding that fit. And when you find that fit, that's when the magic happens, right?
100%.
See it all the time.
Yeah. It's addictive, like the flow state. Yeah. I want more of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and solution with us today.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before you wrap this one up?
No, it's your show. I really love being on, and thank you, whoever has went through 30-ish minutes to listen to our conversation. Thank you for that. I really enjoy your company, and I don't know if you want to leave, how to reach me and stuff like that. And
we'll leave your website on the video, so it'll be there for anyone that wants to follow up with you.
Yeah. Lots of different. I can leave you with a question. Just thinking about. I think you had asked some of this in the intake. Just if you can, something as simple as tell somebody that you know and trust the last time you're at peak performance, and then elaborate what that was, what you were doing, who you were with, and spark conversation with that person. Again, somebody you know and trust, they know you, a partner, what have you, and just generate some sort of dialogue on seeing perhaps you're off track in that moment. And God, I felt so good when this was happening and that was happening and they were there, I was here, all that sort of stuff. And realize that might be a starting point to be like, I'm off track. I didn't know I was off track. Maybe I scratched that itch, see where it goes.
Think about what peak performance was and how that felt.
Yeah.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tyler.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, this wraps up this episode of Unstoppable Journeys, discussing solutions to your problems to help make your journey unstoppable. Thank you for joining, and have a great day.